At first glance, horror isn't automatically associated with feminism. The traditional slasher flick is recognized for its violence against female characters, almost always by a male antagonist. Furthermore, the final girl trope glorifies purity culture by narratively rewarding the virgin of the group, thus embedding a patriarchal standard into horror.
Now you're no longer a virgin. That virgin. Now you gotta die. Those are the rules.
When a genre is known for seeking entertainment in the misery and punishment of women, especially from predominantly male directors, there will of course be a reputation for misogyny. That being said, many modern horror films are flipping the script to reflect feminist themes in contradiction to horror trends of the past. Similarly, they show advancements and focuses of the feminist movement from the time that the film was created. The most prevalent example of feminist horror is the idea of the monstrous feminine, as coined by Barbara Creed. This theme reverses the traditional horror trope of victimizing women, instead allowing the woman to be the monster. Oftentimes, monstrous feminine movies allow an exploration of women's sexuality. Audre Lorde's 1978 essay, The Erotic as Power, sets up the celebration and expression of women's sexuality that is detailed in many of the following films. She encourages women to draw strength from embracing the erotic, not just in a sexual manner, but through seeking joy and satisfaction in all fields of life. Audre claims that the superiority of repressing one's sexuality is fashioned within the context of male models of power. To reject this idea is to reject man's power over us. This theory is crucial to the liberation found in the monstrous feminine trope. Jennifer's Body from 2009 reflects the achievements of the third wave of feminism, which focused on women in positions of power, sexual harassment, and the expression of women's sexuality. It was directed by Karen Kusama and written by Diablo Cody, showing an emphasis on the creative power of women. The film features two childhood best friends, popular and beautiful Jennifer and awkward and shy Needy. Although, it is pretty ridiculous to try to portray Amanda Seyfried as unattractive. I mean, she's literally Sophie from Mamma Mia. I don't know what you mean. They go to a bar to see a band, who later that night attempts to sacrifice Jennifer in a ritual for fame. However, the ritual calls for a virgin, and because Jennifer isn't one, the spell backfires and turns her into a succubus. Now she must eat people to stay alive, and focuses her killing on men that desire her. Needy tries to prevent Jennifer from harming anyone, and in the end must kill Jennifer to stop her murders. As a result, Needy is sent to a psychiatric facility, but breaks out to exact revenge on the band in Jennifer's honor. The movie serves as a fantasy for women who wish for revenge for the objectification and abuse they faced from men. Jennifer is aware of her seductive power, and uses it to her advantage to punish those who only see her for her body. She is confident in her expression of desire, and unafraid to assert herself. Moreover, Jennifer is portrayed as human by the narrative and by Needy. This clarifies that not only is she more than her body and more than a monster, but that the true evil of the movie is man's treatment of the feminine body. This film became a cult classic after bombing at the box office due to misleading marketing. The Me Too movement influenced Jennifer's Body's rise in popularity because of its themes of justice for sexual harassment. Additionally, Megan Fox revealed in interviews how the male characters who objectified Jennifer represented the way she was treated in other movies and in pop culture. The movie's disruption of the male gaze and respect for Jennifer's sexuality and body was liberating for Megan.
I realized that in filming that scene where they sacrifice me, that for me, that was really reflective of, I felt like my relationship with the movie studios at that point. Because I felt like that's what they were willing to do, to literally bleed me dry. They didn't care about my health, my well-being, mentally, emotionally, physically at all. And they were willing to sacrifice me physically as long as they got what they wanted out of it. And it didn't matter how many times I spoke up and said, I'm hurting, this isn't right, I need someone to protect me, this is going on, someone needs to listen. It didn't matter at all.
Similar in theme to Jennifer's Body is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, a 2014 Persian film. First, this movie also features a woman director and writer, Ana Lily Amirpour. The main character, an unnamed vampire, holds no fear of men because they are her victims, reversing not only the dynamics of the real world but of typical horror. She is somewhat of a vigilante by going after men who abuse or control women. For example, a pimp who extorts a sex worker named Ati. The girl is friends with a man named Arash, whose father Hossein is a heroin addict. Hossein is killed by the girl in another act of justice after he forces Ati to take heroin. Her vampiric power is linked less with her sexuality than Jennifer's is, but it nonetheless makes her a threat. She is, as the title says, able to walk the streets at night without concern for her safety, a privilege that all feminine-presenting individuals have yearned for. The vampire represents not only revenge against predatory men, but fearless independence. Raw is the final film on the list to include a female director and writer, Julia Ducournau. In this 2016 French film, the lead Justine is forced to eat meat during college hazing despite being a vegetarian. This brings forth a need to consume human flesh, and although she faces immense distress, she never gives in to her cravings. In opposition to this is her sister Alexia, who instigates car crashes to satisfy her cannibalistic tendencies. Raw explores the fear of women's sexuality and how society's view of it can cause women to bury their desire. Of course, the film's representation of these urges is cannibalism, which is indisputably a lot more taboo and concerning than one's sexual awakening. The film Ginger Snaps from the year 2000 deals with the natural and unavoidable horror, puberty. The main character, Ginger, is attacked by a werewolf on the same evening that she starts her first period, consequently turning into a werewolf herself. The two transitions are marked by different behaviors, but the same physical changes, growth of hair and cramping. Her transformation into a monster is paralleled with one's physical changes during puberty, and her urge to feed reflects the ravenous and often alarming emotions of sexual maturation. Once a social outcast, Ginger is now attractive to her classmates and begins to have sex, meanwhile becoming violent towards animals and humans. Her sister Bridget seeks a cure for lycanthropy and ultimately must kill Ginger in order to stop her. The close link between Ginger's monstrous tendencies and her desire explores society's fear of feminine sexuality. This framing demeans her as only a monster and is especially striking against the purity of her sister, reminiscent of the final girl trope. On one hand, Bridget's will to help and comfort Ginger, despite her lycanthropy, paints her as sympathetic and more than just a monster. This is similar to Raw, in which Alexia is depicted as evil, yet humanized by the kindness of her sister Justine. Another movie that follows the same theme as Ginger Snaps is the horror classic Carrie. Just like Ginger, the appearance of Carrie's telekinetic powers align with her first period. Her experiences with bullies at school are mirrored by her mother's abuse at home. As Carrie's powers grow, so does her confidence, resulting in her winning prom queen. However, she is humiliated by having pig's blood dumped on her, triggering a telekinetic killing spree. The film is resolved when Carrie returns home and murders her mother in self-defense, and then follows her mother into death as their house collapses around her. Although the plot of Carrie follows closely with the puberty-based horror of Ginger Snaps, the overall moral aligns more with revenge as well as sexuality. The repression of her sexuality and autonomy that Carrie's mother inflicts on her leads to Carrie fighting back. The repression that Carrie's mother pushes onto her is reflective of the political fears of the film's time. Carrie was released in 1976 during the middle of the women's liberation movement, aka the second wave of feminism. As a result, there was an uproar of worry that women would have too much power over themselves and their sexuality. When Carrie stands up to her mother, it can be seen as symbolic to fighting for liberation. Well, almost. Her defiance of her mother's ideals don't actually set Carrie free. Shelley Stamp, a film historian and curator, writes that Carrie is not about liberation from sexual repression, but about the failure of repression to contain the monstrous feminine. By linking Carrie's sexuality with her identity as a monster, as well as her never truly being freed from her fear of her mother or her powers, Carrie is not able to rejoice in her womanhood. In contrast to this is Jennifer, whose sexual liberation is brought on by her transformation into a monster. Carrie is also comparable to Jennifer's body in A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night by showcasing a woman defending herself against attackers, in this case bullies. It's worth noting that Carrie's oppressors are less of a feminine exclusive experience than those in the previous films. My reasoning for this is that Stephen King isn't a woman, and therefore resonated with a different attacker than Diablo Cody and Anna Lily Amirpour did. Nevertheless, it's obvious that this movie is somewhat of a blueprint for feminist horror, pioneering tropes in the 70s that would only be honed in later decades. In other words, Carrie walked so that modern horror could run. While it is clear that horror as a genre has learned to represent women, it still falls into the same pitfalls as the limelighted aspects of the feminist movement. Where are the women of color? Where are the LGBTQ characters? Over the past few decades, there have been complaints that feminism as a whole focuses on the issues that are relevant to white women and excludes the specific needs of women of color with blatantly racist undertones. This point is explored in A Black Feminist Statement by the Combahee River Collective, which states that it was our experience and disillusionment within these liberation movements, as well as experience on the periphery of the white male left, that led to the need to develop a politics that was anti-racist, unlike those of white women, and anti-sexist, unlike those of black and white men. Solid representation for people of color in horror has gotten a little better over the years, but it is typically reduced to stereotypes, especially in the case of black women. Everyone's heard of the trope of the black guy dying first in a horror movie, or observed the phenomenon of the token POC being a mystical guide to the hero. Even today, it's unconventional to see a horror protagonist be anything other than white. Similar issues face LGBTQ individuals in horror, as well as in some feminist circles. It's common to hear, although increasingly frowned upon, the misconception that trans women aren't real women. This fear or bias is clear in some older movies. For example, The Silence of the Lambs. The antagonist in this film is portrayed as unwell because of their gender expression, in a way that is made indistinguishable from their villainy by protagonists. I can recall feeling deeply uncomfortable my first time watching Silence of the Lambs because of the way the investigators treated Jamie Gum, or Buffalo Bill's, identity. They acted like it was part of what made the character terrifying, and like Jamie's gender expression was an effect of mental instability. The representation really upset me because not only is it bad representation, but it's some of the only trans representation in the genre. For all of the steps forward that horror has made, it still lags behind in some aspects. There's been a call to action to take intersectionality into account in our feminism, and the film industry needs to recognize the same issue. Horror is a very multifaceted genre in terms of its representation. Of course, there are factors at play when analyzing the feminism or misogyny of a film, such as the year and political atmosphere of when it was written and released. However, can we really excuse older films just because they're old? Should we expect more out of the modern day or embrace what's already been created? Ultimately, it's up to you to decide if horror is a feminist genre.